Either way. Why don't you take that one?
Thanks. Okay, thanks.
All right. I just got to get used to this. Swiveling, find the right balance on this chair.
My feet can touch the ground, I'm just saying.
That seems very unfair already. I don't know. I was recalling earlier that in my first newspaper job at the Lloydminster Times.
It's a very dangerous thing to joke
it
about
is.
your
It's
interviewer just
incredible.
before it starts. Yeah.
In my first newspaper job, I did color commentary for a federal election on Lloydminster TV, and which was a good test ground to screw things up. And they gave us swivel chairs, and they told me, whatever you do, ignore the floor manager. Whatever hand signals he has, don't pay any attention. It's not for you. So I did that, and I was swiveling in and out of the shot, like for about 25 minutes while this frantic person was signaling at me. So I feel it's going to be that. I might have to hold on to you, Bill.
Okay.
Country needs to hold on to you, Bill. Okay, look. I think we had a lot to digest there to start with, and I know that you can handle the toughest of interviewers, but I'm not intending to be the toughest of interviewers. This isn't a gotcha interview. This is what can Bill Morneau explain to us about what inclusive growth is meant to be? And as I travel across the country, I talk frequently about inclusive growth, and people are very attracted to the notion. And then as we get deeper in the conversation, they say, but what exactly is inclusive growth? And I go, I don't know. We're going to ask the Minister of Finance. So here you are. Why don't you tell us, what do you mean by inclusive growth?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's great to be here. And it was great to hear Jonathan. I don't know where Jonathan is sitting now, but great to hear that frame, because I think that provides us with some context for both our discussion and the discussion today. I guess I can start with inclusive growth and say that was really what animated our last election campaign. And the context is really important. From our perspective, what we saw as the two sort of fundamental challenges as we started considering our electoral opportunity, the first was around decelerating growth. So a sense that with aging of the population, with the great success we'd had over the last generation with women entering the workforce, and the fact that those two trends, which had produced good growth for decades, had started to decelerate in the decade before we came into office. And inevitably, what that led to was a second concern, which is growth slows, and people are worried about how they share the pie. Growth slows, and people are worried about whether the opportunities will be there for their kids and their grandkids. So our observation was that we had to focus on growth with whatever levers we could use in Canada. But importantly, we had to make sure that we were demonstrating advantage to Canadians, to middle-class Canadians, and I'm going to use that. I know some of you are probably fed up with us talking about the middle class, but it's really important that we show people that the advantage of that growth is actually generating opportunity for them and for their families if we're going to deal with that sense of anxiety. So for us, inclusive growth is very much about thinking, what are the measures that we're doing that are actually going to benefit the broadest cross-section of Canadians? So as you've seen our policies, you've seen some demonstration of things that we think are really importantly showing that demonstrated advantage. When we lowered taxes for middle-class Canadians, we increased them on the top 1%. And it means that 9 million people had lower taxes. So that's a broad cross-section. It's showing the advantage that might come. The kinds of measures that we've taken on child benefits, where 9 out of 10 families get it, but I don't get it. That's showing that more benefits are going to a significant cross-section of people who aren't necessarily seeing as much advantage from economic growth as they would have hoped. So it's showing that inclusive nature as a starting point, and then as we make investments, if we think about investments in infrastructure, making sure we recognize, are we doing the things that are actually going to benefit the broadest cross-section? So investments in affordable housing, well, that's recognizing that we really need to advantage people who are finding significant challenge in housing in our major cities across the country.
So, to what extent is this about redistribution? Simple redistributive policies that have been around for a long time. That's how you started out.
It's an important question. that we started with by saying we need to show the benefits. So if we're going to deal with the anxiety, we need to show immediate benefits. So yes, there was a redistribution aspect of that, but we recognize that we can't redistribute our way to success, that we actually have to show growth. But as we take each individual initiative, we need to be making sure that they're all showing advantage to a broad cross-section. When Jonathan's putting up the slide about how we can have a sustainable growth situation, I don't know that many people here would argue that if a small cross-section of the population is seeing the benefits of that growth, that it's really going to be sustainable, because we need to have a sense of confidence and optimism among our broad population to have the kind of investments that will be sustainable.
Well, I guess that takes us very naturally to some of the political outcomes we've seen over the last year at Brexit and the U.S. election, and we await the first round of the French election this weekend. But what lessons have you drawn off that, and how has that perhaps accelerated in some way the urgency?
For us, we came into office with that as our animating philosophy, and obviously what we've seen has demonstrated for us that this sense of anxiety is very real. It's given us renewed resolve that we need to be showing people the benefits of growth, and the virtuous circle that we're trying to create is create a sense of confidence and optimism so that people will be able to be behind the kind of investments we're going to make, not trivial investments. Saying that you're going to double the size of infrastructure investments in this country requires people's willingness to go along with you for a long period of time. It's past one electoral cycle. So we see that we need to continue on that focus in order to be able to make the big long-term investments. And that's really what we're about. The kinds of things that Jonathan's talking about is whether we can have a long-term sustained approach to growth. We're not going to have that if people don't believe that it's going to advantage them along the way. And what we're seeing in Brexit and in the United States, we believe, is people having a sense of disquiet. It's not advantaging them.
So what Jonathan does with his questions is he tries to make them vexing. And so I think we get the question about, can we be competitive, and can we build competitiveness in a sort of digital, technologically driven economy that rewards talent particularly, and be inclusive at the same time? And what are the trade-offs there?
We think that the starting point to being able to make choices is to deal with confidence and optimism. So again, those first measures that we took, increasing disposable income for most Canadian families. So the average family with kids got $2,300 more after tax through the Canada Child Benefit. And we're seeing that disposable income having an impact on the economy. We're seeing an increase in jobs. Jobs have gone very well over the last year, which provides for us, we think, the ability to now make the choices that we need to make. And so we've done, and the question is not now about whether we've done it, it's about whether we can sustain it, but we've made some choices where we think Canada can have a comparative advantage. And we've said, there's 6 places. We've said that in the natural resources sector, we have a comparative advantage. In the clean technology sector, with the kind of skills we have in the natural resources sector, we have a comparative advantage. In the health and biosciences sector, we can be world leaders. We've said that in the agricultural sector, we can absolutely, with the kind of opportunities we have in this country, be world leaders. In digital technology, we've demonstrated it in Kitchener-Waterloo and Vancouver and Montreal. And in advanced manufacturing, we can be world leaders, and we can make the kind of investments like we have demonstrated with artificial intelligence that can form the basis.
These technologies are called disruptive technologies for a reason, because they disrupt, and I guess this is an echo of the whole idea of creative destruction, but on the way, a lot of people get displaced. And that leads us, I guess, back to, in some ways, redistributive policies to investments, but what we haven't talked about yet is labor force participation. So we have huge, large swaths of the Canadian population that don't participate in the labor force to the same degree as others. And some of them are surprising to me. I suppose this will be a gender-based comment, which sounds bad, but I'm surprised that still women don't have the access to the economy, don't participate at the same rate as men, and it's stalled. It's stalled about 8 points below men for about a decade. Indigenous peoples don't participate at the same rate. Youth have trouble getting in. So how are you going to attack? I mean, we go seniors, disabled. How are you going to attack on all those fronts, if you will, to make sure that people can participate in an economy that's disrupting at the same time?
Our perspective is we have to go at all levels at the same time. So the starting point around the disruptive issue is making sure that Canadians broadly have the skills to be competitive. So it's not just starting with single subsets, but thinking broadly. So we've said we need to start at a young age. We've talked about coding for kids. We've said that cooperative education is important. You saw an investment in MyTax around significantly increasing cooperative education. We've put much more significant investments into labor force development agreements with the provinces. So these are important broad initiatives. And then we've said that we need to specifically go after groups that or parts of our society that are going to make an enormous difference. Obviously, you start with women, representing more than half our population and underrepresented, as you've said. So we've made a commitment to focusing on every aspect of our budget and what actually are the impacts of what we're taking on from the standpoint of increasing labor force participation for women. And you've seen a focus on early learning and childcare because we know that's an enabler. You saw maybe a small measure in this year's budget where we looked at the venture capital situation in Canada, where we've been successful, and realized that women were not nearly as successful at getting access to venture capital. So we put in a tranche of venture capital specifically geared towards women entrepreneurs. Indigenous Canadians, we recognize that there's enormous opportunity not only for better educational outcomes, but better workforce participation. But you need to start with education. So we've started with basic infrastructure. A building block obviously there before you can go to anything else is making sure everyone has access to clean water, then thinking about housing, thinking about schooling, and trying to get people into the labor force. So we are trying to go after places where we know we can have an important opportunity and create more resiliency against the potential change that
I
is
think
coming.
if you were running your company and people said, okay, here's 100 things that we need to do, you would say, we need to focus on a strategy. We need to focus on fewer things. And I, for one, recognize that a government is much more difficult than running a company. Having said that,
but focus. First of all, optimism and confidence. So giving Canadians that sense of opportunity for them and their families. And it's demonstrated that it's working right now. And then thinking about sectors where we can be investing for comparative advantage and
But let's take the obstacles to women participating in the labor market. And one of the main obstacles everyone knows is childcare. You put some money into childcare in the budget. There was $7 billion over 10 years, I think, for early learning and childcare. But why not just go all the way? Why not do a Quebec-style childcare program? We saw a huge lift in participation there. Why not just, if you want to do it, go and do it?
Well, we're always going to get questions from people saying, have you gone enough in these different places? And you said we put some money. I think perhaps most people in this room would think $7 billion is rather a lot of money.
Over 10 years. I know the way it says $7 billion, but then when you look at the fine print.
But we're trying to make a difference, recognizing that situations in all parts of our country are not the same in this particular challenge. We don't have the same situation in urban and rural environments. And we're moving forward to make a big difference and recognize that there will be other things that we'll be doing that will also have an impact on that challenge. So the job, as you said, is maybe more challenging than you might expect before you get it. And it's always about thinking about balance and finding the place to make the investment where you can impact on this particular area and considering as well that our affordable housing investments are going to have an enormous impact on women because disproportionately people who are underhoused in this country are single women. So these things all have to be taken in balance.
Okay, and the end goal, as we say, I think, is to get more labor force participation, to remove those obstacles, get economic growth through that. This is a question that keeps confusing me, so I have you here, I'll ask you. We hear this term, the fourth industrial revolution. We hear about AI displacing jobs in huge numbers, and I think your own Growth Council talked about 40% of jobs being at risk. 40% of jobs. We hear about self-driving vehicles that will displace truck drivers. So a huge category of employment in the country. So how does this desire for more labor market and getting people ready for labor market fit with a labor market that isn't necessarily going to be there?
We've seen disruption before, so this is not a new phenomenon. Perhaps it's going to accelerate. When faced with a challenge, what do? You start to think about the ways that you can actually prepare yourself for addressing that challenge. So we are starting by thinking, how do we make young people more resilient in the face of that change by giving the building blocks, the skills that they need in that environment. We're working towards ensuring that we have enough funding for training at in both the traditional way through our employment insurance system, but also additional funding so that we can work with provinces to get training for places where we know there's going to be skilled opportunities. We're working on creating a vehicle, a business, government vehicle to help to ensure that people have access to understanding where the jobs of tomorrow will be so they can actually take on the correct training. We need to go at this on a step-by-step basis. We are not going to find one silver bullet to dealing with this challenge. And the only way we can do it, we believe, is by starting with confidence, making the investments in people that are going to allow them to be resilient in the face of change, and reaching forward to the places where we're going to have the best potential advantage so that as people get those skills, they can move into those exciting jobs. There will be challenges along the way. I will say that so far our approach is working. The challenge will be to maintain a focus on the long term and to keep making those investments in a way that will make a long-term difference.
Okay, one last question. Ontario is experimenting now with a basic income, what used to be called a guaranteed annual income. Finland is experimenting with it. Elon Musk is telling us that with the automation that we're going to have and the evolution of the workforce in that automation, that there's no choice. Quote, I'm not sure what else one would do. That's what I think will happen, a basic income. Your government doesn't talk about the basic income. I'm not sure if it's just not consistent with the approach you're looking at. So is there something you don't like about that approach? Is there something you'd prefer to do or are doing other than that?
We are certainly doing things that are different from that, and that is focusing on the places where we see that there's significant opportunity for better outcomes through our policies.
So you're not a basic income finance minister?
I'm not, and I will tell you that instead what we've said is we need to deal with places where people are absolutely challenged to be successful. So when you see us increase the guaranteed income supplement for single seniors, it's recognizing that their opportunity for retraining to get back in the workforce probably doesn't exist. So that made a big difference on senior poverty and will have a continuing impact. Our investments in families, taking a way of means testing our child benefits so that it's going to impact more families in a more significant way is actually creating a much better situation for the people that are actually in the most challenging era of their lives.
So we get to see competing visions here from the federal government and the Ontario government of how a social and economic policy should work moving forward.
Well, we will always, of course, pay attention to experiments that are going on, and we don't want to be averse to learning from ideas that are piloted in different parts of the country. So I think that you should never close off avenues. But I will say that our approach is very much about thinking about how we can help people to be successful. And that's working to create the opportunities. It's working to ensure that people have the skills to be successful. And
do you think the basic income is kind of giving up?
I think that we'll watch the pilot and we'll observe those.
Giving up on opportunity, giving up on the hope of the future by that.
Again, our sense is that we want to make sure that we are providing people with opportunity, and we're recognizing the challenges that they're facing, and we're providing them with the best possibility of being successful in what might be a new and changing economy. Recognizing that not everybody is going to go for those new jobs in that new sector of the economy. So we always need to think about transitions into other kinds of roles, and we'll do that.
Okay, well, thank you. Next time I guess ask the question.
Will it be all about guaranteed annual income?
I'm down to a 3-minute answer. I appreciate that. That's good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that
Well, I'm
see
trying to follow up my chair
and the
again.
Prime Minister here, so hopefully we'll all be consistent.
Yeah. We'll check on that. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Well, thank you, Bill Morneau. That was interesting, and now I think I've got an answer on labor force market participation versus a basic income. In any case, as a difference. So now I just want to take a moment to introduce Jane Tabor, the Vice President of National Public Relations, who's going to come up here, and she's going to explain we have a engagement technology that we'll be using today, and so you'll all be able to participate as we go along in questions, et cetera, that come up here, but I'm probably getting over my head already, so let me introduce Jane, who will explain this to you. Jane.
Thanks very much, Edward. And as Edward mentioned earlier, you're encouraged to use your cell phones. And we've got this great new technology and a new engagement tool that we're going to be using at the summit, and it's called Slido. Some of you might have heard of it before. And it's very simple, and it ensures that we are addressing your most vexing questions. We've got lots of vexing questions, and you can ask a whole bunch of them with this tool. And it allows you to submit these questions and your opinions, and you can vote on live polls as well. So I'm going to take you through it. It's very quick. Take out your smartphones. I want to see everybody take out their smartphones. And I want you to open your browser. And I'm going to go through this with you. So you open your browser, and you go to Slido. Yeah, we'll take time here. We'll go to slido.com. So I hope everybody's doing that. And I'm doing it. So if you're there, it says Slido Audience Interaction Made Easy. Click on that. And you'll enter the code. The code is here on the monitors. It's code 6153. So put that in where it says to do that. 6153. Done. Now you should be you should see everything on the screen. You should be in there, and you want to go to the tab on the right that says polls. So click on that, and we've got a poll. We've got the Growth Summit 2 poll, and here it is. Is everybody there? Tell me if you're not. Okay. What do you believe is the biggest challenge to Canadian competitiveness? Population, innovation, or education? So press on what you want, what you think it is, and then press send, and we should see it build on the screen. Population's trying to get there, but okay. Oh, there we go. It's a little bit of a, it's no horse race at all. It's 59% so far for innovation. And you're going to hear a lot about innovation during the day. And as well, we encourage you during the panels to go and click on the questions portion. You'll see the questions is on the left. Click on that, ask questions. We have a monitor looking at the questions, and you can vote on those questions, and you can upvote them so that the questions that you're most interested in, the ones that vex you the most and you want the answers to, they will be asked during the panels. So with that, I want to introduce our next panel and the moderator, Shannon McDonald, who is from Deloitte. She is the Vice Chair and the Chief Inclusion Officer of Deloitte. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. We are very excited to talk about inclusive growth with all of you and build on the framework that you've heard earlier today. So I'm going to introduce our panel members and have them come on stage and join me. So first, Gemma Corrigan, who is an economist with the World Economic Forum, and Naheed Nenshi, Mayor of City of Calgary, and Tamara Vrooman, President and CEO of Van City. So the first thing, though, that three of us want to talk about is the inclusive stools.
The stools, yeah.
we have side issues, discussions and things about how do you do this with skirts, so.
Well, I used to say I'd never met a bar stool I didn't like, but I'm not sure.
But in this
These
situation,
ones, yeah,
maybe
so,
that's
yeah.
correct.
Not just skirts. There's no back on this thing. All right.
So we're going to just take a moment here of, this is called inclusive collaboration in front of you to help here. Let's see. Yeah, you can get, see, look at, you can go down. This is good, okay, all right. I might be able to do this. I'm going to say a few words though before I do that, in case I get injured and have